Hi guys, welcome to the final episode for the series where I'm going to be reviewing After the Flash's Code. And this is not like last time where it was going to be the final episode. This is the actual final episode because after this I'm going to work on some other videos for Lua U coding. In this episode, we are going to be going over all the previous images that we have screenshotted. And in today's description, we will also have the GitHub link for this whole thing, which will include the images and my code fixes. If anyone would like to, they can create a pull request to try and create physical copies of the code from the images. I will review them and put them into there. Besides that, we're just going to head in and jump right in. So we're going to be doing a full review. So we're going to create a new file, and we're just going to call this After the Flash Finale. We're going to start with episode 1, and we're just going to be going over some general things that chat has done that we're going to try and improve. We're not going to be focusing on all the individual things. This is more for the collective. So, we're going to start with the thing that has been mentioned in every single episode of this series, indexing. Why do I bring this up? In programming, you have to do something called an index for your table. So, we have our local array. Inside of an array, you can do key index pairs. So we can do our key should equal this. The issue is when you do array.key, yes, this is somewhat fast, but you're redoing it and it takes processing power every time. So if you do that enough, it's going to build up, especially if there's enough layers to your table. Not good is the issue. So, what you should do in programming is if you're going to reference, for example, this right here, we would store that as local current section should equal array.key.key. This saves on the amount of indexing you need to do and stuff, so you don't need to continually go to game or replicate. And when you're going through game, the replicated storage and all that stuff, those are just tables too. There's no difference. Even though that is your game's running thing, it is still the exact same thing as a table. You want to avoid indexing it. So instead of doing blah, 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 we would do game that replicates storage or remotes, store that as a variable, and then we could reference join server. This code is shared sentimentally through a lot of things. Another thing is Chad's use of attributes. Attributes are great for a few things. So let's say we have our instance here. In fact, we're actually going to keep this here, and we're going to jump down to a new section. Boom. So we can do this, we can set attribute. The issue is when you set an attribute on the server, that's going to then send that to every client, even if they don't need the data. This is very bad because it's a lot of traffic on your server, and when the player joins, it's going to hemorrhage their joining. What you really should do is for certain data, like, for example, let's say we're storing something very basic, like props ID. So we can just do get attribute PID. And this would be like the actual ID, not the prop itself. Like, so it'd be the unique ID you use to find it. That's fine. The issue is when you're storing stuff like set property, set attribute, color, or all these things. That is too much data. That's going to bloat your game. It's best to have a states array, and then we can do states test. And here we can then store data for our object. And whenever we're going to clean up our object, we just need to do states test should equal nil. This is very important. Why do I bring this up? Because in almost all of chat's code, he claims a lot of variables, aka declares a variable. I use the word claims, so if I mention that, that's what I'm mentioning. He has all these variables, but he never cleans them up. And yes, the garbage collector is efficient and will clean them up eventually. That's more lag for your game to try and find values to clean up. It's best to nil out values whenever you're done with them. And also, it helps you figure out what values you're no longer using. Overall, better to do things. And nilling values is important because if you keep something in reference, like an instance, and then try to destroy it, it's going to stay existing in memory until that value either goes out of scope or is set to nil. So it's good to nil things whenever you need to. Or it's not need to, but like whenever you're not using it. So another one is we're going to want to avoid all these layers of if and for if. We should try to declare variables up top and avoid just all this nested code, as it makes it hard to read. That's a very basic thing, easy to fix, but it's important for your programs. Same sentiment here. We're looking at all of these things, and we see reusing of indexing, all these attributes. A good thing you should look into is when you're doing stuff like this, instead of doing if this, else if, blah, 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 we can instead just check this. Test.name should equal this. Actually, we can just do should equal current section. We're just using current section as an example, just so you can understand it. And test or tester. What this does is it keeps it at one line, and you don't need to type out this full if statement. Instead, we can just check the value and set the name to be the correct thing. Now, it doesn't work for if you have complicated things, like a whole specific set of conditions. For that, you should use a case switch, or if it really cannot be checked with a case switch, an if block. I prefer not to. Once again, with this, we have the same sentiment. Try to avoid using all of this stuff here. When we're creating our mount, for example, because this is for a mount, when we're creating our mount, we should already be waiting for all these things when it's created, and not waiting for them after. So one initial load, that would be the best way to handle things, to prevent issues with, like, if parts are loading from the server still, and all these things. It would be best just to replicate the whole vehicle to the client and check if the parts are there. A big part as well is we shouldn't be having every single vehicle loaded on the server. This is going to cause a lot of issues for clients that don't need that vehicle. Instead, we should stream the bare minimum, aka like a skeleton of the vehicle. The players sit in that, and when a player loads into an area or enters an area, they will fetch the closest vehicle and will load it onto the map and stuff, and will assign all the players to their things. Or just weld the vehicle to the, you know, the skeleton and stuff. This way, it still looks good, but we don't have to worry about having to clean up all of these assets on the server, and thus better loading. And it also gives you advantages and stuff, like when you're on the... Oh, I can't speak today. When you're on the client and stuff, you could load different variants of the same things. So, much better in terms of settings compatibility. Once again, enumerators. Important thing. We should be using enumerators for everything. So you can just store all your things into a giant table so you can reference them in other places. This will help keep your code clean and concise. Modular coding. This is actually something I will compliment Chad on. In his System 39, he is actually now using modular programming. It's phenomenal. I am very proud. He started using the modular programming. He still suffers from almost every other issue I've mentioned, but he's using modular code now, which is great for all kinds of things. This is just awful. I have no comments. This is just the worst code I've ever seen in my life. If, for, if. You should be trying to break these into either functions or just trying to layer them. This is awful code on every level. I have no compliments for this. This is the worst code I've ever seen. We don't need to worry about that. That's not something we're worried about. Well, yeah, as you can see, it's more of the same stuff as we've been mentioning throughout this whole thing. More of the same indexing, attributes, namespace, this right here, combining your data into smaller formats. Over and over again, I've been trying to point this out. We want to compress our data. We need to try and shrink how much data there actually is. Like, let's see, where's my example? Like this. Even if we weren't doing the function I set up down here and we wanted to keep it as this is still cleaner and easier to read than... Where is the image? This is still easier to clean than this. I mean, not clean, read than this. That over there is just awful programming on all levels. Episode 4. Same rough idea. We want to make cleaner namespacing and all of these things. We want to make sure it's clean, easy to read. We want reusable code. Lots of functions. Reusable code everywhere. case switches, as I've brought up in many other episodes. We want to try and reduce the amount of else ifs we use in our code for faster execution. Just, again, same thing. Cleaner code, more tables, all that stuff. Even though, yes, putting things into smaller tables will increase the amount of indexing needing to be done, there are advantages to it, like having shared components across all your scripts, and much easier editing for your code with a lot less lines. This, let's see if I can find a good example here. This, for example, with our enums, yes, we are having to do self.enums.notify. This does look like it's a lot more. It's infinitely better, though, than this module.gui.blah, blah, 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 blah. You see the issue? We're referencing too many things. Well, I guess not referencing. I guess we're indexing too many things. I'm bad at speaking, so... Another issue is collection service usage. We should try to have some kind of custom system, because if you're going to use instances, you shouldn't use collection service. We should just try to know where everything is and load them properly. It's better to use modules to store all your data, but it's not necessary. And I've seen many games that can still run fine. This right here, this is just awful. We should have had a case switch for this to control your input blocks, where you just point to what action was run. Everything here, as I've been pointing out, it's the same things over and over again. Next up, we're going to be getting into one of the most important things that I have brought up a lot, and I haven't really touched on fully with what the problem with it is. Type annotating. Why do I keep bringing this up? When you're writing code, specifically in Roblox, we have something called a type. So if we have a function here, and we're going to call it foo, and it's not food, foo, and we have a function inside called bar. Why is a type necessary? Well, when writing our code, we get autofill and stuff. So right now, we have no idea what this is. There's no values, nothing. It leads to slower development time, and it doesn't help with trying to identify errors. Now, what if we did this? This is actually going to be a player. Now, when we type, we'll just pass nil for now, just because I don't want to type player. There you go. Now, when we do bar, look at all of these autofills we have. We have the events, the methods, everything about the object. And if we try to do something incorrect with the object, for example, we do question mark. I want bar.visible, I want bar.name should equal this. When we pop up in our errors, look at this. Type value, type of player could be nil. It's things like this where it could tell you that your value might be nil. Important for your programming all around. Well, we're going to remove this for now. Another issue is Chad's random switching between object-oriented programming and not. For the client module, it makes sense to have that be a giant object. Not the best, but it works. But he should be using it for a lot more things, since objects will make your code a lot easier to work with, and you can do all kinds of things, like with maids and stuff. You can have a maid object that works on collecting all your assets. It's stuff like that that is why you should really try to make your code as clean and writable as possible. Allow me to quickly bring in an example of code from one of my recent projects. Give me a second, please. Boom. This is an example of clean and readable code. We have good comments. Comments aren't necessary. They are better for cleaner code, but they are not necessary by any means. I add them because this is open source. Look at this. We have clean names, good names. We have decent spacing. We try to reuse things. This is what good, clean code looks like. And that will about wrap up our final episode today. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I will likely upload some more videos about Lua U eventually. I'm unsure as of right now, but I would recommend looking into coding yourself and studying how all these things work. As I said in the description, we will have access to all of the GitHub repository I used, so that way you can see the images and all that stuff. And special thank you to everyone over in the After Flash community who helped me try and find these screenshots, because I had a few people help me out try to find screenshots and stuff. So, this was phenomenal. I hope you guys have a fantastic day now, and we'll see you guys next time.